Go through it verse by verse. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. If we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. He begins right off the bat by saying, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. You know, I joked that I would get up and just read that. Not many of you should be teachers and then go sit down. That's it. I'm not wading into those dangerous waters. But there is a danger in teaching. And, you know, why are teachers judged more strictly? What's going on there? And there are hints of this throughout the Scriptures. I put several verses there on the outline if you're following along. In Luke 12 it says, everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required. And from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more. Meaning that if you've been entrusted to teach, then you're going to be measured on the fruits of your teaching. And in Hebrews 13 it says, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls, as those who will have to give an account. I do a lot of teaching in this church, and I'm going to have to give an account. I'm going to have to give an account for that. I'm being held to a higher standard. Acts 20 says, and this is Paul speaking to the Ephesian elders, he says, therefore I testify to you this day that I am innocent of the blood of all, for I did not shrink from declaring to you the whole counsel of God. Paul knew that he was going to be judged for what he taught. And he knew that he was innocent only because he had preached the whole counsel. If he had not preached the whole counsel, perhaps he would have been guilty of some. In Mark 12, Jesus speaking of the religious leaders saying that they devour widows' houses for pretense, make long prayers, and they will receive the greater condemnation because they're the religious leaders. In Matthew 18, woe to the world for temptations to sin, for it is necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. If in teaching someone is led astray, that is a huge deal. There's going to be judgment for that. And in Matthew 12, Jesus says, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. Well, that takes it to another level. It's not just the teaching, but every careless word. God's going to be looking at that. So why are teachers judged more strictly? Because they have more responsibility. They have to make sure that what they're teaching is right. And I remember when I first started preaching, I was terrified. I don't want to say anything that's wrong. And, I'm still a little terrified. And often, you'll say things that don't come across the way you intended, and you think back. Like I sometimes will listen to my sermon messages a few times after I do it to kind of critique myself and see how I can improve. And I'm like, I said what? That's not what I thought I was saying. What are they thinking? That was totally wrong, And so then I get a little nervous because those teachers, they're going to be judged with greater strictness. And to make it worse, he continues in verse 2, and he says, for we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. So he's saying, yeah, we all stumble in many ways, especially with what we say. And so you teachers, you guys are going to stumble in what you say. This is dangerous business if you're going to be teaching. Teaching the word, teaching truth to his people. That's kind of scary. Ecclesiastes 7:20. Oh, the question. Second question, can we ever achieve perfect obedience in this life? This verse is sometimes used as a proof text for this idea of holiness, this idea of being able to achieve perfect obedience in this life. Wesley was one who taught this, and today this is taught a lot, that you can achieve perfect obedience in this life as a believer. With God's help, you can get there. Wesley taught this. A significant number of Methodist churches teach this. Any church or denomination that has the word holiness in it probably teaches that. Church of God, the Nazarenes, they teach that you can, in this life, with God's help, achieve perfect obedience. And when I read this verse, it says, if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man. I'm thinking, well, that's nobody, right? But they're saying, well, no, it's saying if, meaning you can. If you can do that, then you'll be perfect. But then if you flip over, we read it a moment ago, if you flip to down to verse 8, it says, but no human being can tame the tongue. That seems very obvious to me. No human being can tame the tongue. You can't tame the tongue, then you're going to be sinning with your tongue. Ecclesiastes 7:20 says, surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. That seems pretty clear. Earlier in James chapter 2, it says, for whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become guilty of it all. And we know that the law is more a heart thing than an outward thing that we're doing. Even lusting or hating someone for selfish reasons. These things are breaking the law. Philippians 3 says, not that I have already obtained this or am already perfect. This is Paul talking now. If anybody was perfect, it was Paul. And he's saying, I'm not, but I press on to make it my own. And in 1 John 1:8, if we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. And in Romans 2, therefore, you have no excuse, O man, every one of you who judges, for in passing judgment on another, you condemn yourself. And what does Paul say here? Because you, the judge, practice the very same things. I'm just telling you, there's no way you can be perfect in this life. It's not possible. And we're thinking about this section here. James is saying not many of you should become teachers. You're going to sin. You're going to make mistakes with your tongue and even boast. which we'll talk about here in a minute. But, so who's really in danger? Who's really in danger? It's not just the teachers. It's not just the teachers, it's everybody. If you are or have been a parent, you've got responsibility there. You're teaching a lot of things. You're going to be held to a higher standard. If you are ever giving advice to someone, sometimes we give advice and they don't want the advice, But still, we're giving advice. We're going to be held to a higher standard because we are teaching. And it's kind of scary when we think about it. We need to be careful about what we're saying, careful about how we're instructing others. James has some pretty strong words in here about the tongue, referring to it as, in verse 8, this restless evil, full of deadly poison. And down in verse 15, the things that we say that are not in accordance with God, demonic, he uses that word. So it's some strong words. I think we need to acknowledge that there is evil at work in us and at work through our tongues. And so he uses these illustrations, right? These are great illustrations. James is great with the illustrations. He does most of the work for me. I don't have to come up with things. So, these bits in the horses' mouths, it's just this little bit. You pull the reins left or right, and the whole horse goes that way. It's just in like the rudder on the ship. It's just this little rudder. And the pilot turns it, and the whole ship, the massive cruise liner, little rudder, that's all it is. And so it is with our tongues. Just a little thing, like that post that I mentioned, on social media. A little post picking on someone, and then everyone else joining in, and then it's there. Can't be deleted. And he speaks about this boasting, verse 5. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. That's what the tongue will do, right? You ever boasted about something that you wish you hadn't boasted about? How great you are, one way or another, and then suddenly everybody knows you're not all that great after all? Sometimes we have... I remember one time, this was a really silly boast. I was a little kid. We were on this trip, and we'd stopped at pizza. I was with my classmates. It was some kind of field trip. I don't even remember where it was going, a museum or something. And they said, hey, we have to go soon. And they had taken too long bringing the pizza out. So the pizza was there, and we had barely started eating. I said, well, it's a proven fact, boasting of my intellect, I was like 8. It's a proven fact that the faster you eat, the more you can hold. And, the whole table's like, oh, okay. And so we all start, picking down. Okay, silly. But there were ramifications, because we all had stomach aches after that. And that was my fault. I caused that pain not only to myself, but others. But Proverbs 18:12 says, before destruction, a man's heart is haughty, but humility comes before honor. You have a haughty heart, a prideful heart, destruction's on its way. Who was I to tell these guys about eating? That was a lie. They bought it. I don't know why. But it was, fun in the moment. Jude 16. And Jude here in 16, he's talking about specifically teachers who are boastful. He says, these are grumblers, malcontents, following their own sinful desires. They are loud-mouthed boasters, showing favoritism to gain advantage. Matthew 26, Peter put his foot in his mouth a few times. This was one of those. Peter said to Jesus, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same. He's boasting. I'm with you all the way, Lord. And I wonder if he hadn't made that boast, if he would have been able to recover much more quickly afterward. But because he had boasted at his faithfulness to the Lord, man, you can feel his depression afterward. And 1 Corinthians 13, this is how we're supposed to be. This is about love, right? This is what we're supposed to be doing, not boasting. It's not about us. It's about the others. And verse 4 says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant. Love doesn't boast. And what is there really to boast about? Everything that we have, we've received from somewhere and someone. God has given us everything that we have, so what are we boasting about? Are we boasting about our intellect? God gave that to us. Boasting about our physical abilities? God gave that to us. Boasting about our house, our job? Everything that we have comes from God. So when we begin boasting in ourselves, we're taking the glory away from God, the one who actually provided those things. And so that, we don't think about sin the right way. That is evil. If we're boasting in ourselves and taking the glory away from God, that is evil. It's evil. God should be getting the glory. God should be getting the glory. So what are the illustrations of the tongue tell us about control? We have in verses 2 through 5, he's talking about this bit and the rudder, and we see that there's this control, right? The control. If you control the bit, you control the direction of the horse. You control the rudder, you control the direction of the ship. And so in the same way, our tongues control which way we're going to go. If we make some stupid boast, we're going to eat all that pizza too fast, and we're going to be sick. We're going to affect everyone else. But, sometimes it's a lot more serious than that. You have a coworker comes to you, they're complaining about their spouse. You got to be real careful here. Okay, you can say something foolish, and just little words say, "Oh, I would never be like that." And you're boasting, right? I would never be like that. And at the same time, you're trying to show compassion, maybe, but how might they take that? They might start to have feelings for you. A very, very small thing that you say with your mouth can begin something much deeper and lead even into an adulterous relationship. Gossip, slander, one little thing. I noticed the pastor's spending a lot of time with Mrs. Bennett. I saw him out the other night, and that could have been who knows what, but suddenly it's all around the church that the pastor and Mrs. Bennett have something going on. Lives can get destroyed over some little comment that's made. Nagging, constant nagging, a little word here, a little word there, and you're sowing bitterness, destroying relationships. Sometimes it's just an influencing thing. We want to have power. We want to exercise power. We want to have influence, and so we'll kind of say some things, try and get some people to do some things. It's a lot easier to get people to do the wrong thing than it is to get them to do the right thing. Often that's not good either. Complaining. It's a little complaint here, a little grumbling there, and suddenly we start taking sides, and we've got division in the church over some issue. So there's a lot of control. But the second image that James gives us here is the fire, right? You can see how these things get out of control. And that's why James uses this image of the fire raging out of control. And in verse 6, the end of 5. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. We have this fire, it's out of control. Totally out of control, raging. You hear these stories, right? How did this massive hundreds of acre fire get started? Well, the campers didn't put their fire out right. That's all it was. Now you got this major issue. It can't be controlled. And that happens when we misuse our tongues, when we say things that are not in the right spirit, not out of love. So how should we think about our tongues? And he has all this long list of things, starting in verse 6. Fire, hard to control. You got to have constant vigilance in watching what you're saying. A world of unrighteousness. The words are involved in every kind of evil. Anything that's going on. You're either thinking the words or you're saying the words, plotting the words, planning something, plotting something. It's with words. The whole world of unrighteousness is involved. The staining of the whole body. Jesus said it's not what you eat that makes you unclean, but it's what comes out of your mouth that makes you unclean. Setting on fire the entire course of life. We talked about how some of these little things, gossiping or bitterness or even a kind word with someone can rage out of control, take you places you didn't expect to go. Setting on fire the entire course of life. And set on fire by hell. Set on fire by hell. This is strong language. He's saying that Satan himself is involved in you misusing your tongue. Whenever we're not doing what God wants us to do, we're serving evil. We're serving Satan. And untamable. And it goes back and forth talking about these different creatures that we've tamed, but the tongue is untamable. Sometimes we say the dumbest things. I say the dumbest things. It's ridiculous. It's and sometimes it's out of my mouth before I even realize it. Why'd I say that? In 2 seconds, I'm going to be spending the next 6 months trying to repair that relationship. It's ridiculous. It's a restless evil. A restless evil. The tongue is a restless evil, and that's within us. It's not the tongue, right? It's not the flesh and blood tongue. That's not the issue. It's our hearts. It's our hearts. That's why Jesus said it's not what goes in, but what comes out. He's talking about the heart. Our hearts are broken. Our hearts are sinful. Our hearts do not yet conform perfectly to the image of Christ. And as long as that's the case, we have this restless evil, this original sin, this old man that is in us from before we were converted that we're constantly at war with. And Paul talks about that a lot in Romans 6 and 7. You can go and read more about it there. He also says, James says, full of deadly poison. What we say kills. What we say destroys if we say the wrong thing. It's a deadly poison. And it can be infectious. We're talking about the grumbling that causes division. It doesn't happen immediately. It's a poison that infects and spreads. And then there's the blessing and the cursing. Verse 8 and following, we bless the Lord and Father with our tongues, but we also curse people made in the likeness of God. Again, that's evil. If we are cursing something that God has made in His image, we are in effect cursing God because we're cursing His image. It's evil. And we have this in our hearts. We have this in our hearts. In verse 13, he says, "Who is wise and understanding among you?" And again, I think this is directed primarily to the teachers, and maybe there was some division, rivalry going on because of these teachers. And he's saying, who is wise and understanding among you? Who are the wise ones? Who are the teachers? Who are the leaders? Who's wise and understanding? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. So what is James saying here? Why is he bringing up works? What does that have to do with anything? What he's saying is, if you want to know who a good and wise and understanding person is, then look at their works. Look at the works will tell you what kind of person he is. The works will tell you how trustworthy someone is. In John 13, Jesus says, "By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." If you know somebody who does not have love, that person is not a disciple. No way. John 15:8, "By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples." You know somebody who's not growing, not changing, doesn't care to, doesn't want to, they are not a disciple. Not a disciple. Matthew 7, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles?" And he goes on and talks about that some more there in Matthew 7. The principle is someone that you admire and look up to for instruction ought to be somebody who's also bearing fruit, somebody who exhibits love. If they don't have that, you need to find somebody else. That person is not a disciple. And James goes on to say much the same thing here, but he goes into more detail about what it looks like. A false teacher, a false leader, and someone who is full of these things. And these principles apply to everybody, whether you're a teacher or not, because every teacher is supposed to be the model disciple for everyone. And we need to mimic these things in our own lives, whether or not we are teachers. So in verses 14 through 16, think about how does James describe jealousy and selfish ambition? How does he describe it? "If you have bitter jealousy, selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice." All right, this is, jealousy is envy. You can imagine a couple of teachers in the church who are, wanting more followers than the other guy. It's really sad. We see evidence of that through the New Testament, of this kind of thing going on. And there's envy, and boasting. You're going to boast about yourself. Well, I was trained by, Silas. I was his disciple for 2 years, so you guys know who Silas is. So, you guys want to come and follow me. And the other guy, touting some other thing off. And what are they doing? It's envy, it's jealousy, and it's selfish ambition. Selfish ambition to make themselves greater. There's nothing wrong with ambition itself. To have aspirations, to want to grow, to even, start a business, do all these kinds of things. That kind of ambition is fine, but when it's selfish ambition, when your motivation is for you, rather than to glorify God, rather than to care for your family, rather than to, some good thing, if it's just for you, to puff yourself up, that is selfish ambition. What we ought to be doing is glorifying God and deciding to glorify God in what we do. And then he describes these things as earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Earthly means it's of the world. This is wisdom, which is of the world. It's not of heaven. It's not of God. It's of the world. The world is a joke. You want to go to the world for wisdom, you're going to believe in ridiculous stuff like evolution. I can't fathom thinking that all of this could have happened, accidentally. It's just ridiculous. We can't go to the world for wisdom. Unspiritual, which means it's of the flesh, not the spirit. The flesh has all of these desires and motivations that are totally against the spirit. And demonic. It's of the devil. This kind of wisdom is serving yourself rather than serving others. And when you're serving yourself, you're serving the devil. So earthly, unspiritual, demonic, of the world, of the flesh, of the devil. That's this jealousy and selfish ambition that we see. Instead, James says that we should have this wisdom from above. It's a focus that's not away from God, like we were just reading about, but it's a focus on God, a focus on the truth, a focus on what is right. And wisdom is more than just knowledge. We know that, right? Wisdom is also what we do. Wisdom is knowing the right thing and doing it. You know, that's wisdom. And from above means it's not from us. It's not from the world. It's not from me. It's from above. It's from God. And so, how does he describe all of that? Starting in verse 17, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. This is the wisdom from above. And what does it mean? Well, the pure means it has the right motivations. Okay, your motivation is right if it's pure. And this is we have a hard time making decisions sometimes, right? We know, what are we supposed to do? What's right? What's wrong? This is wisdom right here. This is how we make those decisions. This is the wisdom from above. It's pure. You have the right motivation. You're trying to make a decision. Make sure you have the right motivation so that it's pure. It's peaceable. It desires peace, not division. It's going to be, whatever your decision is, whatever you're trying to do, it's going to bring about peace. It's going to move the situation toward peace. Gentle, meaning slow to anger. Patient. You're moving in a way that's, this wisdom is gentle. Takes a long time to get a gentle person angry. Open to reason, meaning teachable. If you have a situation that's going on, and some of these situations that the elders deal with are difficult. You have to be open to reason. You have to be willing to let the Word transform you. You can't be pig-headed about what you believe and not listen and not reason. Full of mercy, meaning willing to forgive. You need to be willing to forgive. God has forgiven us more than we could ever forgive others. And so we need to be willing to forgive others. Good fruit. Wisdom is going to move in a direction that bears good fruit, does good things, does the right things. And impartial, meaning fair to all, or as many as can be. It's a decision that is as fair, as equitable as can be. There is some, by the way, on this one that's impartial, there's some disagreement about what the Greek word actually means. Some people translate it as unwavering, meaning if it's a wise thing, it's not going to be this way one time and this way another time and going back and forth, but there's a clear way forward. I personally think impartial is the better word there, but there you have it. Full disclosure. I'm teaching. I've got to make sure everything's out there. Sincere is the last one, meaning honest. It's not for show. There's no secret hidden agendas going on. It's sincere. Sincerely wanting to do what is right, what is wise. And the focus on all these things is toward God. It's not toward self. It's not toward the world. There's no boasting. There's no selfish ambition. There's no jealousy going on there. The last question, in verse 18, says, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Now, what is a harvest of righteousness. Harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Okay, so we have people who are making peace, those who make peace. They are sowing peace. You know, you guys know what sowing is, right? You know, planting seed in the ground. They're sowing peace. They're planting peace. And then the harvest is righteousness. Now, if you think about these leaders who have these rivalry going on, and they're not sowing peace. Not at all. But if they were about making peace with one another and sowing peace, encouraging peace among the whole church, then there'd be a lot less sin going on. Because there's a whole lot of sin going on if there's rivalry and everything. So if they're trying to make peace and they're sowing peace, then all the people are going to be more righteous, right? Including, you know, the leaders. There's going to be a harvest of righteousness all around. James at the beginning in chapter 1 says, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." So James is talking again about this righteousness, producing righteousness. And it's not something that is done with rivalry and boasting and misuse of the tongue. It's not done out of anger. But instead he says, be quick to hear, listen to one another. Be slow to speak, slow to get angry. In Hebrews 12, we read, "Strive for peace with everyone, and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord." So we see that peace and holiness, this peace and righteousness go together. In Romans 14, we have this command. "So then let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding." Again, if we're sowing peace, we're going to be sowing unity. We're going to be trying to build that up. We're going to be building one another up with our words, not tearing down, not causing division, not gossiping and slandering and nagging and all the other lying, all the other things that we do. Instead, we need to use our words to build one another up. Listen to this one. Ephesians 4, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." No corrupting talk. Only such as is good for building up. You know, if you just read it at face value, it's saying, don't say anything unless it builds someone up. That's it. And remember, we read earlier that every word, I can't remember how it went. Every careless word in Matthew 12, we will have to give an account for every careless word we speak. And here, Paul is saying, only speak words that build up. Only speak words that encourage. Only speak words that give peace. Yeah, there's some evil in my heart. There's some evil in my tongue. I have a lot to overcome yet. Matthew 5, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. You know, it's ridiculous that we can be called children of God, isn't it? I mean, who are we? God is so humongous in this universe with no end, and he's ordered all of that and the teeniest little particles and atoms, and we're made in his image. But still, we are so filthy and sinful, and you know, I marvel at the flood. People look at the flood and think, wow, I can't believe he wiped everyone out. I'm thinking, why did he save anyone? He should have wiped them all out. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. If you are a son of God, then you're pretty close to being the image that he wants. You know? He's made us in his image, but sometimes we don't act like it. Well, if we are peacemakers, we're acting like it. That's what this verse is saying. Blessed are the peacemakers. They shall be called sons of God. And who was the greatest peacemaker of all? The Son of God. In Colossians 1 it says, for in him, in Jesus, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. His blood shed on the cross is what made peace, because he covered our sins. He covered our sins, washed us clean by his blood, making peace with us. And we merely put our faith in Christ, trusting in him for salvation, and we are children of God. We are saved for eternity. We have an inheritance that we cannot imagine, that cannot be taken away from us. That's why it's called the good news, right? It doesn't get any better than that. So if you have genuine faith, your life will show it, including what you say, and even how you say it. Maybe even what you don't say. So what kind of harvest does your tongue produce? What kind of harvest are you reaping with your words? Are you sowing peace? Do your words build up, edify others? Are you reaping righteousness? What will you do in order to become a better peacemaker? If we are peacemakers, then we are doing what God has called us to do. We are following his example. Now, how can we do that? How can we be better peacemakers? I think sometimes the best way to do it is just to keep your mouth shut. There's several proverbs about how we should keep our mouths shut rather than, say something. Sometimes it's best just to keep things to yourself. But when we speak, we need to be mindful of the fire. Realize there's a fire that could be let out and released at any moment by what we say and cause all kinds of things to happen. Lead us in a certain way. Affect others. So we need to be mindful of that, and we need to speak words that edify, speak words that love, speak words that lift, encourage, comfort, correct. There's this passage in Isaiah 61 I want to close with. This is Isaiah speaking about the church as the bride of Christ and the glorious righteousness that is ascribed to us by Christ. And it says, Isaiah 61, I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My soul shall exult in my God, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness. As a bridegroom decks himself like a priest with a beautiful headdress, and as a bride adorns herself with her jewels, for as the earth brings forth its sprouts, and as a garden causes what is sown in it to sprout up, so the Lord God will cause righteousness and praise to sprout up before all the nations. That's what he's calling us to do. We can't live like the world. We have to live in righteousness. We have to sprout up around the globe, living righteous and speaking words of life and using our tongues for his glory and not for ourselves.